Welcome back to another episode of Let's Face the Facts. I'm your host. My name is David Almeida. I'm an actor in Orlando, Florida, and every week I sit down with an actor or artist friend, watch an episode of the classic sitcom The Facts of Life, then I hit record. We talk about the show and anything and everything else we might be inspired to discuss. My guest this week is Darryl Pickett. Darryl was here around Thanksgiving time, and I said, come on back here. So I brought him back for another episode, more fun, more frolic, more fancy. One thing before we start is last week, if you remember, I told you I couldn't find the message where a dear devoted listener had answered the question of how many students were attending Eastland. To remind you, the student body is 200, revealed at the end of season 9. Well, I figured out who it is. He wrote me another note. Thank you, Pete3000 on Instagram. I love you, Pete. I so appreciate it. And it was a DM on Instagram that for some reason I didn't see. I'm not as Instagram savvy as I wish I were. I'm really, really more committed to Facebook. That's where I focus most of my energy. And that's really only because they dragged me kicking and screaming away from MySpace. You may hear in my voice that I'm a little bit sick. Yes, I'm sick again. I was sick over New Year's, and I'm sick again. Shut up. I'm treating it as best I can with as much sugar and caffeine and chocolate and lack of exercise. And I'm staying the course, people. That's all there is to it. So, back to this week, Darryl and I watched Season 4, Episode 13, called Magnificent Obsession. And the original air date was January 12th, 1983. I think we're ready to jump on in. Let's face the facts with Darryl Pickett. Welcome back, Darryl Pickett.
I feel very welcomed indeed.
I was thinking God, he was just here, but it's been 11 weeks.
11 entire weeks, I know.
That's it. You last were here, Season 4, Episode 2, right at the very beginning of the season.
Yes.
And what episode was it?
That was The Source. That was the big issue episode.
The abortion one.
That was the abortion one. That succeeded in sidestepping the issue pretty entirely throughout.
The non-issue issue.
But I guess we were to be impressed that they even talked about bringing it up.
Yeah. It was one of those if we dance around it, we're still maybe a little bit brave, but not really.
But not entirely. No.
Darryl and I just watched Season 4, Episode 13, called Magnificent Obsession. It was directed by, of course, the wonderful Asad Khalada, and written by Linda Marsh and Margie Peters. They're the women who course-corrected the entire series back in Season 2. And they've been on hand as producers for some time, ever since then. But you don't see many scripts actually written by them. So this was a little, when I saw their names appear, I was like, oh, okay, good. They're still actually writing as opposed to supervising others writing. And the original air date was January 12th of 1983. And do you know what the title means? Magnificent Obsession.
I feel like there's some kind of movie with that or similar title.
It's a movie, yes. It's actually been 2 movies.
It's been 2 movies?
Yes.
Okay.
It is a novel that was written in 1929, and then it was made into a black and white movie in 1935 starring Irene Dunne and Robert Taylor. And then in 1954, a Technicolor version was done, starring Jane Wyman and Rock Hudson, directed by Douglas Sirk.
Oh, my.
And
I'm thinking this is some kind of romantic drama.
It's Douglas Sirk being involved means absolutely that there's a melodrama component of it. And God, the Douglas Sirk, are you familiar with the movies? I love them.
Oh, yes.
But it's kind of a gay requirement. Gays love the Douglas Sirk because of the glamour factor, because of the melodrama and the romance. It is a romantic story, but the interesting thing is the obsession is not like a person obsessed with another person. In fact, it's about, through a series of extremely heightened, over-the-top circumstances and tragedies, that Rock Hudson, who is a rich asshole, for lack of a better, more elegant expression, who is confronted with basically having to start being a good person. And it is presented to him and to us in this spiritual but not too spiritual way about if you start doing good things and maybe doing good deeds anonymously as opposed to living only for your own pleasure, and it eventually is something that will feed upon itself and you will be happier. And they say that this sort of snowballing cycle of goodness will become a magnificent obsession of yours.
All right.
So yeah, to hear the title, you think it sounds more like a stalker almost.
Right.
Last thing I just want to point out is All That Heaven Allows, the follow-up to Magnificent Obsession. That was, of course, the film where Jane Wyman was the older widow who takes up with the sort of handyman about the house, who is younger than she, and all of the stigma and judgment she is subjected to. And just for the record, she was 38. She was an old, dried out, spinster widow hag at 38.
At 38, yes.
And the cradle she was robbing was 29-year-old Rock Hudson.
Oh, indeed.
And it's just bizarre. Oh, Hollywood. I think we're ready to jump in, don't you?
I think so.
We start off in the cafeteria and gotta stop already. Cannot proceed in typical me fashion. I have to point out that this is a very weekend-heavy episode, so we have a lot of street clothes.
Yes.
I believe we have 3, if not 4, complete sets. I think there's 3, actually, complete sets of street clothes. And trying to edit my comments and make them more... let's just say, in general, it's about more of the same of what we get. We get some Argyle sweaters over blouses. That's fine. Add a bow tie to it. You're like, really? We've got sweatshirts. We've got Joe in her Lumberjill plaid shirts. And Blair, as usual, is not dressed nearly to the full capability that she could have been dressed.
Sure.
As a quote-unquote stylish rich girl. But anyway... and I think all of them, like, it was like most of them had jeans on the entire time. So they just changed the tops. And anyhow. So we start off and we are in full swing preparing for what, Darryl?
We have a Save the Seals protest coming up. Mm-hmm. And boy, the first thing that hit me, first of all, was that before anyone said a word, there was that kind of pause,
that space work.
That you're like, are they ready to go yet?
It's just Mrs. Garrett like walking across or is it Mrs. Garrett or someone else? But yeah, it's just that sort of, we have to establish activity.
That's right. So, and make you say everyone is here and doing something.
Yeah.
But then the very first thing. So Tootie has made a sign, a Save the Seals sign.
Yes.
Which she has attached to the stick upside down.
Oh, that Tootie.
Oh, I tell you. And when this is pointed out to her, she says, well, baby seals are too young to read. It had a visual image, a drawing of a seal.
Yes. And it was like bloodied and stuff.
Yes.
Like,
and I thought, well, they'll know that's upside down. They may not be able to read.
But can they interpret images? Beautiful. This is my argument that they don't use a laugh track on this show, because that was a clear setup, joke, punchline.
Yep.
And it got nothing.
Nothing. No.
And even with Tootie doing her type of a thing. Yeah, odd. And I have to point out, this was a big cause at the time in the early 80s.
Yes, it was.
Somehow, somewhere, it became very prominent in our culture about the clubbing of the baby harp seals.
That's right.
And I remember That's Incredible did an entire story about it, and they had to cut back to Kathy Lee Crosby saying, the images you're about to see are very brutal. And we, parental guidance, and they actually showed them clubbing them, skinning them alive, and it was, pretty awful.
Pretty awful. And then interestingly, for once that more serious cultural moment had passed, it stuck around as a, I remember when I was in my sophomore year in college, that You could just say the two words together, baby seals.
Oh.
And a certain number of people around you would go, oh, and start talking about how worried they were about it and all that sort of thing. And it just those two words, they carried a lot of associations and kind of unfocused concern.
Yeah. And I don't know whatever happened with it. We don't hear much about the baby harp seals.
Nor do I.
I'm sure it's because the problem was solved 100%.
Oh, of course.
And we have no more cruelty to animals on the planet.
And save the whales as a catchphrase came not long after that and had longer legs.
Oh, totally.
Or bigger fins.
Nice. Very well done. So funny you bring that up because a couple of weeks ago, we had Mrs. Garrett and her older boyfriend discovering they were politically at odds. And it manifested itself through Mrs. Garrett saying, we're going to a Save the Whales rally. And the person being dismissive of, oh, really? And then she talks about union lettuce. And I'm like, this is really, or that was really, the first time the Facts of Life really delved into true blatant liberalism. Like there was a sense that, well, these are girls and these are girls of the 80s, so they're modern and progressive. And certainly there's the girl power feminist slant that one would expect. But this was like where they full on, and like I said, in Reagan's America, this is where they were going full on liberal nut job stuff as the right would portray them. Do you agree?
Oh, yes.
That back in the early 80s, the Save the Whales, no nukes, unionizing,
right?
All that stuff was considered.
That was the nutty left.
Because Reagan was the one who brought order and conservatism, and it was honestly it was an earlier, less obvious Trump situation of make America great again.
Right.
It was like it's 1980, and this guy who was a movie star in the 50s will restore.
Yes.
Literally the law and order he restored in all the cowboy movies.
That's
he
right.
made.
That's right.
So yeah, the 80s were a very, very generally conservative time.
A very conservative time, and I mean, I grew up in two conservative households, and yet, I mean, and I don't know if it was a response to Norman Lear shows that I watched or whatever, but I mean, I started slipping left all by myself.
Good for you. And you didn't have the advantage of being gay, as far as
I did not.
Gay automatically pulls you in that direction where you question everything in the establishment because you're like, wait a minute, people like me don't have equal rights to other. What the fuck?
Right now, see, from my point of view, I stayed involved with church things. And liked it. I liked feeling like I belonged in that, but that I started to see a conflict between the apparent teachings of Jesus and the way in which conservatives were willing to treat certain members of society. And I had a long way to go. I had a long way to get to whatever level of wokeness I have achieved. I had a long way to go from there. But that about in that early 80s. That slip started and it never stopped.
So with all this activism and activity going on, finally we find out what is driving all of this. Chad Broxton. God, you fucking hate him just based on that name.
Just the name Chad. I mean, though now at his introduction, I will say too, the first of two in this episode, first of two big kisses that get the audience. Ooh.
Yeah, we get that. Ooh.
And I will say too, he read older as an actor.
We are going to talk
significantly so.
Yes, he is a tall drink of water. He actually had to sort of crouch and slouch down a little bit to reach Blair. Very attractive and $1 million smile and dimples, and I mean, gorgeous.
Yeah. And Mrs. Garrett clearly agrees with that assessment.
We have a moment coming up. We'll get to that. So his name is Gary Hudson. He is still out there. He is still working. He is one of those people in the 80s who, is he a teenager or is he 35? It's hard to tell the difference. He is, in fact, 27. That's a little old.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He's 27, and remember, Lisa Whelchel Blair is 18.
Right.
Both the actress and the character.
Yes.
Now, he's playing a college boy. We are talking about that he is a student at Vassar.
Yep.
But before we get to his college, so he's supposed to be no younger than 21, unless he's a graduate student, and that would be,
Yeah.
I'm not sure we want to go there. Because a grad student technically would make you 24, then it's getting creepy. She's 18. She's an adult, but still.
Yeah.
Really. He's still working. Next month, he's going to be 64 years old. He has got a bunch of projects in the works on his IMDb page. And he's still in great shape. He looks like he does a lot of tough. His face is toughened as he's gotten older. So he's playing a lot of older tough guy roles, the heavy. And I would venture to guess he does a lot of stunt work too on the side. I don't know why. I presume that he does. So Mrs. Garrett comes in, and he says, "Speaking of lovely ladies, hello, Mrs. G." And she stops and gives us the thing that feeds my soul and makes me happier than anything, flirty Mrs. Garrett. And her response is, "Oh, hello." And it is heaven.
It is.
Absolute heaven.
A great moment in an episode that does not have enough, Mrs. Garrett.
Agreed. We get some wisdom moments. We do get some wisdom moments.
We do.
But so this Save the Seals rally is this afternoon. And all the girls are involved in this because Blair has been in charge. And Blair says that Chad has opened her eyes. The rich don't have to be idle, because he is from a prominent, wealthy family, but they're involved in causes like this. And we learn that his aunt is a federal judge. His cousin ran for governor, except there was a scandal.
Yes.
And Mrs. Garrett says, well, before they caught him with that, and she stops herself short of saying, I don't know if she was going to say prostitute or
yes,
whore or whatever.
But I mean, first thing to have come to my mind. And I've got to say, I truly thought, because I just saw this fresh today, I truly thought, to me, it was Chekhov's scandal. I truly thought it was going to be relevant somehow to the subsequent events of the plot.
Oh.
And it was not at all.
Oh, that it was going to come back. Nope, not at all.
Nope.
Yeah, what we're trying to establish here is that, well, Blair says it blatantly. Politics are definitely in Chad's future because he's on the student council at Vassar.
Right.
By the way, Vassar is in Poughkeepsie, New York. We are in Peekskill, New York. So not only is he a boy from a different school dating Blair, not only is he a college boy dating a high school girl, we're talking a 45-minute drive.
Yeah.
So one can assume they met at the country club, but we'll talk about that too. But you wonder if this is a Golden Girls thing where they're in Miami. And it's like, oh, my daughter's coming to visit. Well, what are you going to do? Where are you going to take her? Oh, I was thinking we could go to Disney or, stop off to this restaurant in Cocoa Beach that I like. It's
That's right.
Those of us in Florida are like, no.
How long is your afternoon? Wow.
For those that don't know, Miami is a solid 4 to 4.5 hours
drive from here, yes.
From Orlando. So we'll give it 4 because Disney is in the south part of Central Florida. But
That's right.
It's like you would spend more of your day driving than at the theme park.
Oh, far more, yes.
So you wonder if it was just, Poughkeepsie's close to Peekskill. Sure, throw that in there. At least at least it wasn't Syracuse or Ithaca or something even crazier. But Blair is acting uncharacteristically awkward around him and stumbling over her words. But fortunately, he thinks it's adorable, and he compliments her on her clothes. Why, I don't know, because her blouse is pretty fugly. It has, it's what I would normally call a Dorothy Michaels blouse, which I've talked about many times. It's got especially puffy sleeves, giving her a lot more width in the shoulders.
Yes, it does.
But the collar is completely bare. There is no collar. It just swags from shoulder to shoulder. And so therefore it looks fussy on the sides and too blank in the middle without a string of pearls or something, because it is matronly, really. Mm-hmm. But whatever. It's a yellow blouse. And so he says to her, I really like that blouse. And she says, oh, it's new. And he says, didn't they have it in blue? And Blair's like, don't you like the yellow one? And he's like, well, I like the way you look in anything, but you look particularly nice in blue. And Blair's like, you're right. Yellow makes me sallow and sick and jaundiced. And Mrs. Garrett's like, he didn't say that. And he says, well, when everything else is perfect, a thing like this stands out like a wart. And Blair says, thank you. And from Mrs. Garrett, we get a Tex Avery level.
Yes.
Mouthing of, thank you? Like, did she oh?
Yes. You could read that from 5 houses down the block.
Oh, my God. It was like, for the balcony, it was so insanely broad. And I'm not saying it wasn't funny.
Oh, no.
It got a huge laugh.
I am still laughing now.
Yeah. It was hilariously funny, but it was one of those like, whoo, girl, you put a lot of effort into that laugh. So then he's ready to go, and before he leaves with all of their posters and their envelopes and stuff that they've worked on, Blair invites him to a fundraiser at the country club. And when she says the country club, he goes, oh, the High Crest? And I'm thinking, how many fucking country clubs do you guys belong to? And if I'm going to take the narrative leap of faith of assuming the only way you two could have met was through the country club, it would be the country club
yes.
through which you met. That's what I need.
Not one of them. But,
yeah. So
apparently.
it's like, how many fucking country clubs? But anyway, she invites him, and he is. And she says it's a fundraiser for saving our streams. And I thought, seals swim in streams, right? And he just goes, no. So she says it's a week from Thursday, and I won't wear this blouse. And he said, well, it's hard to make plans in advance. And she says, make it a maybe, and if you change your mind, I'll understand. And so he says, okay, and then he leaves, and he makes a cute joke, thank you, and the seals say, and then off he goes. Yeah. And we get a beautiful Natalie moment. As the audience kind of laughs, and that laughter dies down on his exit, Natalie does one of those beautiful, Blair.
Yes.
Like, what the fuck are you doing?
A very well executed transition there.
Her razor sharp. It took a little on the job training, but this is where you're being very aware of how razor sharp Mindy Cohn's timing has grown in these 4 years. So they were like, what do you do? You're letting him change it to a no? And Blair's like, I was afraid to ask him. Oh, I hope he doesn't have something better going on. And they're like, what is wrong with you? You never act this way with boys. And Blair says, maybe for the first time in my life, I'm really in love. Long hold.
Oh, such a long hold.
Long pause. Somebody please call cut. And then we dissolve. Sweet baby Jesus.
All of the tension in that scene was that long hold at the end.
True, so true.
Yes.
So then we end up in the cafeteria again. Time has passed. We're wearing new clothes. As I've said before, these girls who are full-time students and have this debt to pay back where they are responsible for making 3 meals a day, 7 days a week for 200 students. They have time to write posters and stuff envelopes, all the extracurriculars. We had a school play last week where they were writing, and everybody was somehow involved in either the publicity or the house management or the costume design. They have time for all these extracurriculars. And now we have some other weekendly downtime where they're sitting around playing chess.
Yes.
Just chilling. And Blair is kind of pacing around, and we learned she's waiting for Chad to call. And expositionally, they're like, I can't believe you're walking around waiting for Chad to call. That's all you do. You never go out with anybody but him, and he's completely consuming your life. So that's what's going on here. And then the phone rings. Blair dashes to the phone. And then we have a chance for the other 3 of them to be like, this is crazy. She's really going overboard. She took everything yellow out of her closet. She won't even eat bananas anymore. Oh, writers.
Oh, my.
And then Joe says, this won't last. And I quote, Blair doesn't get sweaty palms over some guy. And Blair comes running in, all flustered and happy, wiping her hands on her skirt like her palms are sweaty. And nothing is said about it. But Blair's like, he changed this maybe to a yes. He's coming to that fundraiser. Thank goodness I can breathe again. End of scene. Dissolve 2. Cafeteria, yet another day. And yet different costumes. It is now the night of the fundraiser.
I do recall actually being a little bit, because that scene ended so abruptly.
Yeah.
That I didn't think that much passage of time had gone by. So once I did, we're all the way into next week.
Yeah, it was a week from the opening scene. It was a week from next Thursday. So we assume that scene 1 was a weekend, because we're in street clothes. Scene 2 had to be a week later on the subsequent weekend. So now it is the night of that, because I believe she said a Thursday. So yeah, now somehow they're in their street clothes cleaning up after dinner. And it's like, why wouldn't they have still been in their school uniforms? Why would they have bothered to change clothes?
To change, right, yes.
Yeah.
And also, once she shows up, Blair is now in blue.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember registering some surprise that she didn't maybe have, after the first scene in which he tells her how good she'd look in blue, I was surprised that she didn't just immediately show up in the next scene in blue. Oh. As though just as a thing of
suddenly she's wearing blue all the time.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
That totally could have been a thing.
But it waited an entire week for her to...
Yeah, it was like a pinky magenta sort of a blouse. And a pretty one. That actually wasn't too bad. And Blair is in this crazy 1980s prom dress. It is blue, and it's like a deep royal blue. It's shiny. And the stripes are clearly a non-shiny black. So I imagine it was like a black velvet in a shiny blue, which would have been very 80s. And I kind of love this dress for nostalgia reasons, even though it's really fugly. And she is sitting there like what's the character, Miss Haversham? Who's the character from Great Expectations? That is...
That I believe you're correct.
Still, like she's still in her wedding dress,
right.
kind of a thing.
I believe you got the name right.
But she's sitting there like poised and prepped and just staring off into space. And the girls are cleaning up after dinner. And thankfully, the girls at Eastland have very good appetites because they leave no food on their plates.
Not a bit.
They leave crumpled napkins. And Mrs. Garrett gathers the others together. And in true sitcom style, they are maybe 6 feet away from her. And they're like, she's been sitting there for hours. And it's like, is he late? And they're like, no, she's early. What? Blair's never early for... It's like, she can hear you.
She's right there.
She is sitting right there.
Well, so I know she was born 2 weeks early, and that was the last time she was
early.
Yeah.
And it's like they're even making jokes about it. So anyway, Mrs. Garrett is trying to sort of make light of it, keep the mood light, and she's like, do you maybe wanna walk around and get the circulation back in your legs? And as she leans over and offers her something to eat, by the way, Mrs. Garrett's a little tie in the front of her blouse falls into the food. It's sitting there right on what is clearly plates of fake food.
Yes.
Finally, Chad shows up, and he is wearing a 3-piece blue-gray suit. 3-piece suit does not help the case to make a young man...
No, he look
younger.
He looked 37.
Yeah. If he didn't look questionably 35 before, 3-piece suit was the last nail in the coffin there, where it's like, yeah, he looks like a grown up.
Oh yeah.
He comes in and he compliments her, and Blair's happy, and they kiss, and there's more woo.
Now here's the thing. So during that second woo, which is inevitable, that in the background of that shot, you had Natalie, who all of a sudden looked excited and happy that
and
the kiss was happening, smiling.
Yes.
And I'm like, wait a minute. No. Moments ago, you and everyone else were saying, this is no good. He's,
Yeah. She's going over the top. This is crazy.
So I assume that was a bit of direction more than maybe a choice that
I do not
the
know.
actress made. I don't know.
Other than Natalie's just always horny.
Well, that could be.
Yeah.
That could be. I don't approve, but oh my God.
Yeah. Agreed.
That could be.
So then he's like, I love your hair. It looks so pretty the way it cascades over your shoulders. Have you ever thought about cutting it all off? And it was a funny line because it was so out of left field.
So out of left field. And again, here, I thought that this was Chekhov's request for short hair. I was sure that she would cut her hair.
That in the next scene, she would, look like Helen Slater in The Legend of Billie Jean or something.
Yes, or Fantine in Les Mis.
Oh,
you know.
Yeah.
Especially as portrayed by Anne Hathaway.
Oh, my God.
Looking absolutely hopeless. But anyway, and I guess it's a sort of spoiler. That does not happen.
No. And Blair's like, should I? Should I cut my hair? And he's like, well, short hair is in. Not every face can handle it, but I'm sure it would look great on you. And if I'm wrong, it'll always grow back. Ha ha ha. And so it's like, well, we better get going. And Mrs. Garrett, they try to do a visual joke and it doesn't quite land. Mrs. Garrett's like, well, you kids should be off. And she broadly, in the sense of I'm trying to sneak past them, but does so in a broadly obvious way, reaches over to a table where there happens to be a pair of scissors that she grabs. Like, I'm afraid Blair might grab the scissors and start hacking her hair off right now.
Right now. Or that Chad might. Who knows?
I would hope not, but yes. So we're still in Act 1 of this. I know we're talking a lot here, but we're still in the first half of this episode. Dissolve to the parlor, the lounge, later the same night. And once again, no homework, no food prep, no pre-chopping of broccoli. It's Natalie and Tootie and Mrs. Garrett are sitting down doing a puzzle because they're all 80.
Well, it's those other 190-some kids that are, I guess, doing all of the hard work.
I guess. And this is also a public parlor space, as the cafeteria. So it's kind of like, does nobody ever come here to play? Or at least, I'm going to grab one of the puzzles because we're also 80 and bring it back to my dorm. But anyway, Blair comes home and she just looks stunned. She is just almost in a daze. She looks confused, lost in thought. And I mean, something is clearly wrong. Not that anyone else in the room notices. Hey, Blair, how was your day? Did you save any streams? I've never had an experience like that in my life. And Mrs. Garrett's like, oh, I know. Fundraisers can be so moving. Read the room! Jesus Christ! Not Blair. What is wrong? Natalie looked less upset when she came home and was almost raped. Fuck! I mean, it's a sitcom trope, but it's just, I'm covering my face. I wish my listeners could see. I'm covering my face as I do this because it is so frustrating that to sort of set up the misunderstanding. I don't know where they find the humor in that. Right. I don't know where they think that that's funny, where it's like a person clearly is in distress or needs help or needs to be seen.
Yes.
And they're not seeing them.
And they'll take advantage of the slight ambiguity of her initial statement and amplify to, oh, well, that must have been wonderful.
Yeah, well, clearly it was a positive, good thing to which you are referring. Not I'm reading from your expression, your body language, from your tone of voice, and the words that you're saying that something is clearly fucking wrong. Jesus. Anyway, so they say, did Chad have a good time? And long story short, Brad introduced him around. So clearly this is not Chad's country club. She had to introduce him around. So this is a different country club. So maybe they didn't meet at the country club. Maybe they met at a Save the Whales. Who knows? So she showed him around. He met some other families. And he met this other girl. And they left together. And that is distressing news, Darryl.
It is.
But even more distressing, the name of the girl. Do you remember?
I believe it was Millie Hotchkiss.
Millie Hotchkiss? What? Millie
Hotchkiss.
I just want to say, you and I were alive in 1983. There were no people under the age of 70 named Millie.
Named Millie.
In 1983.
No.
No.
Well, let's see. Okay, a good friend of mine had a mom who was probably in her late 30s at that time,
Yeah.
who was named Mildred and went
Mildred.
by
Or
Millie.
even Millicent. We could give you a
Or even
Millicent.
Millicent.
Millicent was name of a girl in the Brady Bunch.
Yeah. Yes, that's
Played,
right.
played by Melissa Sue Anderson
Melissa
later
Sue
of
Anderson, that's
Little
right.
House on the Prairie. But Millie.
But yeah.
What? But to add Hotchkiss.
And then Hotchkiss.
What a!
Yes.
It's like, is that a character from Lil Abner? Is she best friends with Sadie Hawkins? It's just such it was epic writing fail. Epic. So before we go to our commercial, the big long cliffhanger before the long, uncomfortable pause before the fade to commercial.
Boy, was it.
They're like, oh, well, fuck that Chad. There are better fish in the sea. And she says, I don't want any others. I want Chad. He had better call me tomorrow. I'll just die if he doesn't call me again. And that's it. So it's like Blair shit ain't right with Blair over this boy.
Right. That's right.
And that's very upsetting. And honestly, it's a good character exploration for Blair because she has always been so rock solid in understanding her desirability and the charms that she possesses.
In maybe a longer format with better writing, you could persuade us that a person could be attractive enough to put you into that frame of mind, because it certainly happens to all of us.
Yeah. At this fade, I thought, okay, I don't remember this episode well enough to remember. I hope we're given more information to better understand what it is about this guy that is throwing Blair so far off her game.
That's right.
And sadly, we don't really ever get it.
We don't.
And thinking about, well, what could they have done that I wanted? What notes would I send in my time machine back to the writers? And all I could think of is, maybe this is Blair's first college boy. Maybe she has,
could be.
For all intents and purposes, conquered. It's her senior year.
Yeah.
She's been dating boys from Bates, and I can't imagine Blair hasn't dated some college boys before. That's the only trouble with this thing, is that to try and figure out what makes him so, even if okay, so let's take that out of the equation, and let's consider, maybe, is it a status thing? Is it he comes from a political family. He is so cute. He is so handsome. I've always been dating boys, not really thinking about a future, but suddenly he's a person who clearly has big things down the road, and I'm suddenly imagining myself in that picture.
Right.
And this is my senior year. I've got to start thinking like that.
That's right. And so so I could see, and if the show had somehow expressed this somehow, I could see her thinking or imagining, fantasizing a future in which she belongs to an important family.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, and can then be influential and important.
Yeah.
In a way that doesn't just come from her money.
Yeah.
I could see that, but they didn't go there at all.
No, they didn't.
It truly seemed to be, boy, he's a smoke show.
Yeah.
And I'm completely helpless.
Yeah. And we know she's not having sex. We know it's not an issue of
No.
the stuff he does in the bedroom.
No.
Woo! It's like, no, that's not happening. So, that would be the thing I would love to have understood better. So that's the first half of my thoughts, and I do have another sort of thing to tack onto that, but I think it would be better to do it at the end after we've gone through the second act of the show.
Sure.
We're in the cafeteria. We're in school uniforms. Hallelujah. You don't have to look at the ugly street clothes anymore. So it's a school day. And the girls are there, and there's talk that Blair has been distracted. And he hasn't called. Blair says there must be a good explanation. Well, after this buildup, Mrs. Garrett says, well, I don't want to tell you this, but unfortunately, I'm an honest person. Chad did call. And Tootie and Natalie are immediately like, what? Why would you tell her that? And of course, Mrs. Garrett's like, because I'm not a fucking liar. Like, clearly you two are. Because I have a moral compass and I've taught you nothing in the last 4 years. But The long and short of it is the message he left behind was that he and his friends are going skiing in Vermont tomorrow. So this is presumably a Friday. And we don't know how long it's been. This couldn't be just the day after.
No, I wouldn't.
I think it's a
so.
week later.
Probably a week later.
Yeah. But it's one of those, a day after is too soon. A week later is almost too long. But anyway. So she said, so if she wants to go, she needs to call him before 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. And Blair starts to dash to the phone. And God bless her, Joe blocks her. And Joe says, no, you are not calling him.
Yes.
And Natalie quickly joins in the human barricade between her and the phone and says, no, yeah, you're right. Joe is right. What if he does something like that to you again? And Blair says, what about?
I was going to say, at the moment that Joe said, no, you're not calling him at all, I was like, all right, Joe invents ghosting.
Yes, true. And then Blair says, what does it matter? I love him. And now the Mrs. Garrett wisdom. And I'm not going to do it in the voice because it is actually kind of lovely what she says. And I think this needs to be said more, really. She says, Blair, what I see doesn't look like love. I have never seen you so nervous about what to say and what to wear. You're so anxious. You're walking on eggshells all the time. That's not love. Love is supposed to make you feel good.
Right. And totally true, I got to say.
Yeah. That is
totally true.
So one of the others says, you wouldn't treat anyone that way. And they thankfully don't say, for how on the nose some of the writing often is, so why would you let someone treat you that way? They don't say that, but thankfully that's the implication. And Blair says, you're right. I'm going to call him and tell him no. Once again, Joe, arms crossed, standing, no, you don't call him at all. And Blair says, well, I'll never make it if I have until 7 o'clock in the morning. And Mrs. Garrett says, you'll take it 1 hour at a time. And Joe says, and we'll do anything to keep your mind off of him. And Blair says anything, and Joe says anything. Cut to wide shot. Cut to slow fade. For the couple of times in this series when they've done a hard cut, not common, but it has been done, this would have been a perfect chance for a hard cut.
It would have. And I was even thinking, this would be a good time for a hard cut to something like they took her to Chuck E. Cheese or something outside, something outside of the school, something a little more unusual.
I know. Just keep her away. Exactly. Yeah. Because we didn't have cell phones then. It's not like she could have.
Right.
Anyway. So then from there we go to the bedroom where Joe, it's sort of a close-up-ish angle of Joe with her face covered in makeup and rollers in her hair. So what Blair's plot is to distract her is to give Joe a makeover.
Yes.
And apparently it was Natalie's idea. Tootie tries to take a picture. Joe threatens her with bodily harm. Not really much else happens in this scene other than, what time is it? It's only 4:30. So it's only been like an hour and a half.
That's right.
It hasn't been long.
And Natalie gives us sort of gleeful, optimistic summations of how much time is left.
Yeah, Natalie is very gleefully on board with this, even though she was gleefully watching them kiss just a week ago. So then the next scene, we're in the darkened kitchen. Blair comes down. She goes across through the cafeteria, over to the parlor. She goes to the phone, picks it up, but then puts it down. She almost leaves, looks back, but then changes her mind again. Then she goes into the kitchen. She goes to the fridge and takes out some food. What does she take out of the fridge, Darryl?
It is a big hunk of meat. It's like a roast or a leg of lamb or a 2/3 of a turkey. It's big. It's a big hunk of...
Yeah, it has a bone in it.
It has a bone in it.
And it is a bone-in roast, and yet it looks like a leftover.
Yes.
Well, it would have to be.
It would have to be. Yeah.
You wouldn't have it just sitting around cooked.
Right.
So it's just... But you and I both were like, we're not sure. Venison? Is it? It's this neutral, nondescript roast of meat.
Of some kind of animal.
It's roast beast from Whoville. So down comes Joe. Joe wearing her man pajamas and having a blanket wrapped around her. And Blair says she's just getting a snack. It's fine. And Joe's like, no, I'm sitting with you. I'm not leaving your side. So they end up in the parlor. Blair tries to get Joe to go to bed. And she says, I'm not tired. So it's like, we're here.
That's right.
And
I noticed too, when Blair leaves the kitchen, she hasn't just cut off a few slices of meat to take into the other room as a snack.
Oh, no.
Just picks up the whole roast on a plate.
whole fucking thing. Yeah. It's like, wow. This is one of the things I love the most about this episode. And this actually, for the faults in this episode, what we're about to experience is glorious, because this is just the cement to the beautiful frenemy relationship between Blair and Joe, where for all the insults that go back and forth, for all the hatred they spew to each other on the surface, this is the perfect no. When the chips are down, we are friends and we are there for each other. And it is quite beautiful. So then we dissolve to the roast pretty much picked clean.
Yeah.
Like, this bitch has been chewing at it. This was supposed to be a midnight snack.
Yes.
And this has turned into a meal.
This was, yes.
That roast could have fed 12 people, I would gather.
Yes.
But they're just talking.
I note, too, that, it wasn't designed to get a laugh. It wasn't presented as a gag. It was just an incidental. You notice that, she seems to have eaten the whole thing. But I didn't feel like they were setting it up as this is how nervous she is.
No.
This wouldn't be normal. Look how nervous she is. She didn't even notice she ate this whole roast. It was just...
passage of time.
Yeah.
Is really all I think they were going for.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're talking, and Blair says, sometimes I think I'm going crazy. I remember every moment I've spent with him. I think about him all the time. And I question, what if I had done this? What if I had said that? I never knew there was so much wrong with me until Chad. And then it goes into a fairly tight close-up of Joe. And angrily, Joe glares at her and says, maybe there wasn't until Chad. I'm going to go out on a limb and say I think that line reading was too angry. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking that what she's saying is perfect.
Yes, that it's
Yeah.
incredibly supportive thing to say.
Matthew Arder would argue that she's angry that Blair is still hung up over a dude when Joe is right there next to her.
Yes.
And then we dissolve to Joe falling asleep and Blair telling some silly stories of a rich person. And the punchline is just, well, I've been through my share of trauma. It's about the color of the pony and her poodle dying. And it's really just another utilitarian scene to show they're still up together and time is passing. Not going to dwell on it. And then in the next little vignette, they're in the blanket together. They've got the blanket wrapped around both of them, which is really kind of lovely. And it's okay. And Blair says, I still get butterflies when I think about him. And Joe says something to the effect of, you only feel that way because he's the only person that doesn't think you're perfect. And if he did think you were perfect, would you have gone so crazy for him? And Blair does somewhat kick back into Blair mode, where she says, well, if I'm not perfect, and that's a big if, laugh,
Right.
it's not his place to say so. And Joe says, right. It's my place. Oh, frenemies, I could cry. It was so beautiful.
That's a very good moment.
Such a beautiful moment in their friendship. I'm it brought me such happiness and glee. This is another one of those things that could have been developed a little bit more. Is it the fact that every boy has fawned over her? Every boy,
Right.
Has Blair ever been given the runaround? Did he play hard to get when she first tried to pursue him?
Right.
And it was one of those, well, I had to try so hard
Yep.
to get him to go out with me. I can't let go now. It was, This is the fruit of my labor.
That's right. That's the sunk cost fallacy in action.
The what now?
The sunk cost fallacy, which is if you have expended a lot of energy trying to achieve something, then even when the evidence mounts up that it's bad for you, you've sunk a lot of time and energy into it. And part of you is like, I have to see this through. When the right thing to do is to say, oh, no.
Pull the plug.
Pull a plug.
Yeah. But it's called the sunk cost
Sunk cost fallacy. And
fallacy. So then we dissolve. They have that moment, and then they kind of lean over and clearly are going to get some rest. And then the next morning, they're on the couch, both asleep, sharing the blanket. Again, so lovely to see physical connection and affection between the two of them, because we don't get that. They so often are verbally sparring.
Right.
This is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Blair wakes up, and she wakes up Joe, and she says, "Joe, wake up. We can go to sleep now."
Yes.
It's 7:22. We made it. We're in the clear. They hug, and the phone rings. Doe. So Joe answers, and this odd little thing happens between them. Joe answers the phone, and she says, "Yeah, hello?" And then she doesn't say what is said, and she looks over at Blair, covering the receiver.
Yeah.
And they both burst out laughing.
Yes. Now, I found that quite brilliant and quite relatable.
Oh, did you?
I did.
I'm like, I think they're trying to play that it's early, and they're punchy. They haven't slept much.
And I think that's probably it. And yet, sometimes I think I've been on the other end of the phone in similar circumstances.
Oh.
Where it's a tension relief. They just spent a whole night being very tense about this.
Yeah.
And it's here, and it's and then they say, problem solved. It's all over. Phone rings.
Yeah.
And it's not over yet.
And it's preposterous.
It's not over yet. And so it's just funny. And I totally get that. Psychologically, that seems sound to me. That seemed very believable to me.
To me, it was a little borderline. They were almost acting like they were drunk.
A little,
like
sure.
Joe was trying to play up like this shh, shh, shh kind of a thing. I mean, it is early in the morning. You're going to wake somebody up. If we laugh too loud, we're going to wake them up. So it was not dishonest what she was playing. But yeah, I see what you mean. This was a little weird for me. That's all I'm going to say. Okay. It wasn't a big problem. We're just going to say and state that did happen. But again, continuing connection between them. They both had the same reaction.
Yep.
So she finally says, "I'll find out." So she says, "He's telling me, Blair, that they got a late start and there's still room in the car if you want to go. Do you want to go?" And Blair says, "Yeah, but I don't want to go." And then she pauses and says, "I don't want to go." She processes, and that's it. So she says, "I'll tell him. Give me the phone." Then Joe says, "Okay, I'll tell him." And Blair says, "No, give me the phone." So Blair takes the phone, and the slow, dramatic, but they've kind of earned this, and I love it.
They did
I
earn
love it.
Yes.
Where Blair gets on the phone, and just as she's about to talk, she looks at Joe, and the receiver slowly moves away from her face, and she slowly rests it down and hangs up.
That's right. And with it was the perfect arc of her hand over to the.
It could not have been choreographed better by Bob Fosse. It was
that
gorgeous.
is right. It really was, and very slow. There's a bit of a chance you take at it being risible, but I think it worked. And at the same time, and I've thought this a couple times when I've been watching older media, that it's just not as dramatic to turn your phone off, to just hit the end to call button.
Yeah.
And I couldn't make a similar moment of just raising my finger way up in the air and slowly bringing it down toward the screen. I don't think I could make that work in the same way that putting that big receiver back on the hook.
And we don't have the benefit of slamming down the receiver. That felt so good when you wanted to hang up on somebody and you were mad to slam it and to hear the ringer in the phone go ding.
That's right.
It was the most psychologically satisfying thing.
Satisfying to do, and you understood it if you saw it in a TV show or a movie.
Oh God, yes.
That was something, and so we don't have that. We've gained a lot of other things. In losing that, I suppose.
That is something we lost, really. Yeah.
It doesn't mean it was a better world. Just it was a lot of fun to slam the phone down.
It was so much fun. That and prank calling people before caller ID happened.
I did far too much of that.
We both did. Everybody did. That was a rite of passage when you were a kid.
It sure was.
Was to do prank calls. Now, so the clap track does come in. It's the new clap track, not the old one. So it's a little slower. But part of me is kind of like, for the many times this show has had silent credits rolling, this could have worked with that. They, like I said, they had earned it.
Yeah.
And it was a big moment. The thing I think the episode is lacking, the second half of what I was starting with earlier, you kind of already answered the question, is that what we were missing at this point was not taking this phone call was the symptom of whatever disease Blair had.
Yeah.
We still didn't quite get to what the cause of it was. And you totally hit upon it, where the cause of it could have been how hard she worked to get this boy to notice her.
Yeah.
And I would have liked it if they had somehow explored that. They get near it with, Blair, what is wrong with you? What is it about this boy that makes him so special? Why is he different than all the many, many others that we know you have flirted with, dated, and successfully proven to yourself your own desirability?
Right. So
why is he the one shaking that foundation?
That's right. So if we'd gotten any clue as to how somehow he represented a possibility for her that was new, that wouldn't have taken much, I suppose. But
and that she had put a lot of work into it. There, we fixed this, Darryl.
It had not been easy. It had not, like every other one, had been effortless. She had been in control of her own feelings and the situation at all times. And so it's the first time, which would be interesting. I mean, in any storytelling, that would be an interesting arc to see someone thrown by a new person in a way that never happened before, and then find themselves making choices they wouldn't have made, being obsessed with or bothered by things that would never have bothered them. Yeah.
Well, we're at the end of another episode, Darryl.
We are.
Now, typically, I ask my guests about a commercial that they remember from their childhood, but I don't know that I could have you top Sweden House and the jingle that you sang for
Sweden
me.
House would be hard to top. Well, you know what? I can go back to maybe 77, 78 for you.
Do it.
And to a theme park that's not from Orlando, but the original Magic Mountain theme park in California. It's now Six Flags Magic Mountain.
Okay, sure, yeah.
But at this time, it was just Magic Mountain. It had not yet been acquired by Six Flags.
Okay.
And I spent summers in California, my dad's home, nearly every summer during my adolescence. So sometimes these regional things that you wouldn't have seen elsewhere in the country. But I think they had built an extended sort of kids-oriented land in Magic Mountain, which was kind of thrill ride oriented, and they had built something that kids could play around in. And I remember this tune.
Okay.
You can meet a real live wizard who's got tricks right up his sleeve. You can hang around in cargo nets, get lost inside Swiss cheese. You're trapped inside the jungle, just give the bag a whop. And you find the Beanpole Valley, you might sink into its swamp. You can fly around on gliders holding both your feet aloft. Magic Mountain's revolution, it'll knock your little socks flat off.
Wow. Once again, like the Sweden House, where they
just odd little rhymes that stuck with me.
They don't write them like that anymore.
They don't write them like that.
They don't
anymore.
write them like they used to.
So I'll just fly out from a left field here with something else. Just I want to make sure and mention that several months from now, in the month of May, I have
the lusty month of May.
The lusty month of May. I have got an original musical show at Fringe.
Coming to the Orlando International Fringe Festival.
The Orlando International Fringe Festival. So just so your listeners will know to look for it, it is called Down to the Bone.
Ooh.
The Best of Jake Largo. And I will be appearing as Jake Largo, who is a down on his luck, wanted to be a country superstar, and he's 55 now and playing at the Fringe Festival, hoping that maybe now his country career will get that jump start it's needed for so long. So I have written original country music.
Nice.
For this show. You will learn a lot about Jake, who I would put in the lovable loser category, I suppose.
Nice.
Co-starring with me will be Casey Jo Hibbard.
The wonderful.
Yes, and she'll be playing Jake's third ex-wife.
No, wow.
Yes, and this would be one of the cases, one of those things where a middle-aged guy sometimes will marry much too young.
Oh.
And that just about never works out, and it certainly has not in this case.
Wow. So, now, you are a composer. Are you a
yes.
book writer as well? Or
book, lyrics, and music all by me.
Man.
In this case, yes.
That sounds amazing. I can't wait to see it.
I've put the bug in the ear of every listener now.
Of all my 5s of listeners, we hope you will be there at the Orlando Fringe Festival in May. Thank you so much for coming back, for being a return guest.
Always my pleasure.
I'm sorry I couldn't give you something as thrilling as abortion this time, but
no, that's all right.
I love repeat guests. I'm thrilled that you are back. And for some reason, multiple episodes, I've caught myself saying, so, smooches and goodbye.
Goodbye and smooches, as long as they're consensual.
And there you have it. That was Darryl Pickett. I have nothing to add. I said everything that needed to be said during the show. And I have very little voice left, so therefore that's a good thing. Next week, I'm going to be watching Season 4, Episode 14, called Under Pressure. And I will be joined by another special guest. That's all for now. Thank you so much for listening to this week's show. And remember, the facts of life are all about you. Let's Face the Facts was produced, written, hosted, and edited by me, David Almeida. My theme song was beautifully arranged and recorded by Ned Wilkinson. Our website is facethefactspod.com. You have to drop the let's. And that's where you can find extra pictures, video, and audio extras from the digital cutting room floor. Follow the show on social media. We're everywhere under the handle Face the Facts Pod. You can become a patron of the show by going to patreon.com/FaceTheFactsPod. And don't forget, go to your favorite podcatchers and subscribe, rate, and review. Tune in again next week for another thrilling episode of Let's Face the Facts.